Chapter 1. Green Stars. Peter Steele scrolled through virtually identical, low-resolution images on his computer. They were each of the same tiny square of outer space, taken one after another in 30-minute intervals. What started out as a very faint star in the center had become fairly bright by image number 10. Then, by image 80, the star had gone faint again. The brightness event had lasted just 35 hours. It was probably just another star that had briefly passed in front of a more distant star behind it, gravitationally distorting and magnifying the light. But an orbiting planet could also be involved. It'd be cool to get a new exoplanet named after himself. The Feynman Large Telescope had now had 2 full nights of light exposure. By now, it should have collected plenty of photons. It was time to have a look. Peter stood up and stretched his gangly arms, which were almost as pale as his white t-shirt. He reached for a black winter coat and pushed open a metal door. The sterile, white surroundings turned to the blackness of a cold, clear, quiet night. By the time that the door slammed shut behind Peter, he was halfway to a massive, white, domed observatory. Peter put his thumb to a scanner to unlock a side door. He entered. The telescope was huge. It consisted of 7 circular mirrors and looked to be 100 feet wide. "Find aliens yet, Dr. Steele?" Peter gave a little wave to the security guard. "Not yet, Tom." Peter walked straight up to a black cylinder that stuck up from the floor, then looked through the eyepiece on top of it. He could see a single white star. To its right were dozens of bright, slightly green dots of light. But there are no green stars, Peter thought. Red, blue, yellow, sure, but never green. Peter zoomed in closer. The image was getting blurry. Some of the greenish dots were of slightly uneven shape and brightness. A few more faint ones had also appeared from out of the inky blackness. "Tom, come here." Peter kept his face to the eyepiece. "Sir? Would you mind looking through the telescope and telling me what you see?" "Dr. Steele, I'm really not supposed to be touching the equipment." "You have my permission. I'll take the blame." "Boy, well, I've always wanted to use it," said Tom. Peter looked up at Tom. He should have felt small next to Tom's young, dark, heavily built frame, but he knew that Tom was in awe of his job as an astronomer. "Please, have a look." Tom put his face to the eyepiece. "Are those green stars, sir?" "Ever seen a green star before?" asked Peter. "No, Dr. Steele," said Tom, looking up from the eyepiece. "Thanks, just wanted to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks." Peter stepped outside into the starry night. He knew the protocol. Director O'Rourke said that he wanted to be the first to know if anyone found something truly incredible. He'd said it over and over again. O'Rourke gave all of his employees an emergency number that he said he'd answer at any time of the day or night. Most of the researchers felt that O'Rourke had bought his way into the position by donating over $1 billion, so it was nice to see him make some other gesture of devotion. Peter found O'Rourke in his phone contacts. His heart raced. Was he going to lose his job for waking up the director in the middle of the night? Or did he risk losing it if he didn't? He'd always wanted to talk to the director, and now he had his chance. Peter called the number. The phone rang 3 times. He thought of hanging up. "This had better be good," a familiar, tired voice answered. "Mr. Director, I'm sorry to disturb you. This is astronomer Peter Steele. I'm out in Flagstaff, and I think I've found something unique." "Oh, well, I love hearing from astronomers," said O'Rourke, perking up. "Sure beats HR." "Thanks, sir. So, I seem to have found either green stars or something even more interesting." But there are no green stars, O'Rourke deadpanned. I know, sir. Something caused a gravitational microlensing event, but the green stars don't look big enough to have done it, and they don't even appear perfectly round. I think it could be a planetary body with some form of autoluminescence. Do you see a host star? No indications of a host star. The body is all dark, except for the green lights. Wow. Gotta see this. Send me an image and an email with a subject line, green stars. I'll look at it right away. Have you told anyone else? Not a soul. Oh, wait. I already told the security guard. Oh, well, that's probably okay. Not a word to anyone else. I'll be in touch. Thank you, sir. Back in his office a half hour later, Peter had a reply. Peter, this is fantastic. There just is no known physical explanation for misshapen green stars. I can't wait for a by-the-book parallax distance measurement. Give me a rough estimate as soon as you can. Are we talking 1 light year or 1,000,000 light years? Drop everything else, and not a word to anyone, please. He bent over his desk, quadruple checking his math. It was just basic trigonometry, but Peter still couldn't believe his answer. Peter remembered how his high school physics teacher once explained the concept of parallax by asking her students to hold a pencil just in front of their noses. She first had them look at it with their right eyes only, while keeping the left closed. When the teacher had Peter switch eyes, the pencil's apparent position moved dramatically. But when held out at arm's length, the same pencil appeared to move only slightly when Peter switched eyes. An observer on Earth, the teacher said, changes positions like the left and right eye. Between January and July, the Earth reaches opposite ends of its orbit around the Sun, and if the object we want to measure is close, like the pencil held just in front of the nose, then its angular position in the sky would appear to change a relatively great deal when we switch eyes. Peter didn't have 6 months, but his object had indeed moved a relatively great deal. A tiny fraction of a degree, but a lot for 2 weeks. It was just a preliminary estimate, but it had to be about right. It was 957 billion miles away. Call it an even trillion. And that was nothing, cosmically speaking. Just 1/6 of a light year. It was far, far closer than Alpha Centauri, the nearest star system, which could mean only one thing. The green stars weren't stars at all. Only a handful of interstellar planets had been confirmed, since they were nearly impossible to detect as they wandered across the galaxy as long-lost orphans of far-off solar systems. All were gas giants, and all were more than 5 light years away. Would it be the first ever confirmed rogue terrestrial planet? Or was it another gas giant with some undiscovered form of autoluminescence? Either way, it was right in the Earth's own celestial backyard. It was time to give Director O'Rourke another call. Chapter 2. Our Little Secret. I'm just asking to borrow 1 or 2 little probes. Oh, you mean you'll get them back to me? Asked a blonde, middle-aged woman from across the desk. Titus smiled sheepishly at the sarcasm. It was a youthful, endearing smile. He had a shaved head, brown eyes, and light skin. He looked like he had some Asian heritage. And you won't tell me what they're for? Titus sighed. The charm offensive didn't appear to be working. I've helped NASA out a few times, haven't I? He asked. Yes, Titus, you have. But I didn't ask you to do anything underhanded. I'm not trying to be underhanded. I'm trying to do the right thing. Or maybe you don't want to share the glory with others. Titus paused. Maybe she had a point there. Why do all 12 billion people on the planet need to know what I'm up to? Do you know how annoying that can be? When we're using taxpayer dollars, the public has a right to know, said the woman matter-of-factly. When we send probes or make discoveries, the public has a right to know. Does the Department of Defense tell the public exactly what it's up to? Asked Titus. That's a little different. Don't you think secrecy is anti-science? Titus nodded slowly as he stood up to leave. Yes, but sometimes it's about more than science. Sometimes the future of humanity is at stake. I have some bad news, and I have some good news, said Titus, sitting behind a black marble table and examining a shiny black rock in his hand. Yes, Director O'Rourke? Peter stood in front of the desk. Cut the formality and sit down, Pete. Peter drew up a chair and sat down. It's still our little secret, right? Asked Titus. Yes, it is, said Peter breathlessly. Haven't even told my wife. Got any kids? No, sir. I mean, Titus. So, what's the news? Titus slid a printed color photo across the table. It looks like a planet. This is from the Rosenberg Space Telescope. Peter picked up the image. It looked like a close-up of one of the green lights. The image was blurry, but Peter could just make out what appeared to be a shadowy landscape. Is that a shadow? It seems that a geological formation of some kind is casting a shadow, said Titus. Peter shook his head in amazement. So he really had found the first terrestrial rogue planet ever recorded. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Heck, it's even crazier than that. So then those lights... Peter trailed off. I wouldn't rule anything out, said Titus. But how could aliens keep powering their civilization for all these eons without their host star? Asked Peter. It would have to be nuclear energy, right? Said Titus. Then they must be an advanced race, said Peter. Or perhaps the core of the planet is a naturally occurring nuclear reactor, and they're using geothermal energy. They sat quietly for half a minute, letting it sink in. Only a ticking clock on the wall broke the silence. Well, anyway, it's still hypothetical, said Peter. What's the bad news? Peter was pretty confident that nothing could suppress his quiet ecstasy. NASA won't give us a probe. Oh, well, maybe you should just level with them about why we want it. Titus reached across the table and picked up another rock, this one reddish-brown. Is that a meteorite, sir? Yes, I collect them, said Titus calmly. See, I know you're just as passionate about space as I am. How are you able to keep this information to yourself? Peter couldn't contain his excitement anymore. I can't stand it! Humanity is a scourge, Peter. Remember what happened to South Korea? Now that everyone's worried about nuclear apocalypse, we'd see a space race unlike anything we've seen before. We don't want every dictator and corrupt regime trying to send its own mission. Who knows, someone might even have the bright idea of bringing a nuke. If there is life there, we don't want to be heavy-handed. Titus paused. Besides, we found it. Why shouldn't we get to be first? Peter arched his eyebrows. First at what, Titus? I'm building a space vehicle, Peter. It's only right that I offer you a seat on it. Do you want to have a place in history? Peter stared into Titus's eyes for a full 5 seconds. He could see that there was no lie in them. You're crazy, man! You really are crazy, said Peter, smiling. Maybe. Shouldn't you at least send a probe first? I think I'm just going to take the NASA refusal as a sign that a probe wasn't meant to be, said Titus calmly. Isn't a probe cheaper than a spaceship? The time, Peter. The time. It'll take too long to build one from scratch, even for a flyby probe. Then it'll take a few years to get to the planet. Even at the speed of light, it'll take the signal a couple of months to get back. Speaking of which, I really doubt we could even receive a transmission from so far away, considering it's never been done before, and we don't have access to the NASA Deep Space Network. Still seems more prudent than risking our lives, opined Peter with a hint of pleading. What's the big deal about waiting a few years? What's the big deal about risking a few lives if it may mean making extraterrestrial contact a few years earlier? It'd be one of the greatest moments in all human history. I think a lot of good people would be happy to take the risk. What if the aliens are unfriendly? Asked Peter. Then we might die, replied Titus nonchalantly. But it'd be the most glorious death ever. Isn't there a way of telling them we come in peace? Titus laughed. What do you propose we do, Peter? Wave a white flag? Peter paused. What about sending them some sort of video introduction? Titus stopped smiling. Chapter 3. Thin Blue Line. We're a few hundred miles north of the pole. That could be anywhere, Dad. Buzz crouched in the vestibule of a tent, bathed in golden light permeating through the yellow canvas. With gloved hands, he shoveled snow into a pot. Then he set it on an already lit stove. And 100 to the east, I think, said Buzz's father, Sergio, from the interior of the tent. But if you're at the South Pole, which way is east? Go north and turn right. Okay, but any direction would be north. So if you're at the pole and went, say, this way, said Buzz, pointing straight ahead at the yellow tent wall, and then turned right, you'd be going east? And if you went the exact other way, Buzz continued, pointing his thumb over his shoulder, then turned right, you'd also be going east? The first east and the second east are in the opposite direction. That's true, said Sergio, looking up from his mug of steaming coffee. East and west don't mean much down here. Sergio took out his phone, set it down, and gave it a few taps. Just above the phone, a miniature version of Earth appeared as a hologram. With another tap, it was replaced by a three-dimensional representation of a colorless landscape of snow and mountains. It looked completely real, just in miniature. We're over here, between the Miller Range and the Marsh Glacier, said Sergio, pointing his finger. And over here is a blue ice field. There should be a lot of rocks at the edge of the glacier. No better place in the world for meteorite hunting. Buzz picked up the now steaming pot and emptied a small stream of water into a metal bottle. Bottle's finally full, said Buzz. Let's saddle up. The two of them pulled up their face masks and donned fur hats. They unzipped the tent door and climbed out. Buzz squinted as he took in the great expanse of white, punctuated only with dark rock. The only clouds in sight were frozen, wispy cirrus clouds. Is it really going to be blue this time, Dad? A bit bluish. There's no fresh snowfall there, so the motor slide won't get much traction, said Sergio. And remember, what do you do if you see a thin blue line? Slam the brakes. That's right. We'll take it slow. Stay close. Sergio climbed on a red snowmobile, and Buzz got on an otherwise identical blue one to his left. They glided over the snow with not a soul, animal, plant, or lichen, to be seen. Buzz followed his dad at a distance of some 30 feet. He thought of the Las Vegas Strip back home, just a 40-minute walk from their house. How different that world was. This was like a poor man's trip to another planet, Buzz thought. He knew that ticket prices to the moon and Mars had skyrocketed since the Seoul bombing. Everyone suddenly became more interested in space, and the price of meteorites also surged. Buzz remembered seeing the mushroom cloud on TV that day, almost 5 years earlier. He hadn't appreciated how big the cloud was, or just how far the blast radius stretched. He only understood the scale of the catastrophe upon hearing that more than 10 million people had died instantly. It was like the world was ending. All Buzz could do was shake his head in disbelief. But his parents didn't panic, and neither did Buzz. A kid in Buzz's scout troop had been to Mars, right before Seoul. The trip had taken over a month each way, and Buzz heard that he hadn't enjoyed the Wi-Fi-less, cramped accommodations. He wondered if the guy had done it for the likes on social media. Going to the moon would be much more practical, both in time and money, and the photo would look just as good, especially with Earth in the background. Maybe better, Buzz muttered to himself. Soon the soft sound of snow gave way to the harsh, scraping sound of skis on ice. Then the surface became bumpy and rippled, as though waves of a sea had frozen into a state of suspended animation. Buzz noticed a new color to the landscape. His dad had previously taken him to another blue ice area, but it hadn't really been blue. This one had a pale but distinctly blue hue. Sergio's brake lights came on, and Buzz pulled up to his side. The ice ahead was strewn with dark rocks, which stuck out like sore thumbs in the luminous landscape. "Here's the moraine," said Sergio. "The glacier left the rocks here. They've finally been freed from their icy tombs." Sergio opened a bag fastened to the back of his snowmobile. He handed Buzz a pair of crampons and ice picks. He then took out a long rope, tied it to a carabiner, and latched it onto Buzz's climbing harness. "Be careful," he said. Slowly, Buzz and his dad drifted apart, but they remained within earshot. Buzz put on sunglasses to protect against the never-setting sun. He'd heard how painful snow blindness could be. They had been out there for 3 hours, by Buzz's count, and he was pretty sure he hadn't found anything. One rock had set off the metal detector, but it seemed too round and too light. He pocketed it for good measure. Buzz was just starting to think about lunch when he looked up and felt his heart miss a beat. There was a blue line in the ice ahead. Buzz took baby steps forward, better to test the ice. Before him lay a gaping, 4-foot-wide crack. He didn't know if there was a bottom, and he didn't intend on getting close enough to find out. A short distance to Buzz's right, a glossy, black stone was perched on the lip of the crevasse. Buzz took a cautious step forward and reached out with his metal detector, which beeped before it had even gotten within a foot of the stone. Buzz knew that the black fusion crust of a meteorite usually wears off over the years, but he figured that the Antarctic climate might make an exception to the rule. Should he call his dad over? What if he told him not to take the risk, but to leave it be? What if the stone, perched so precariously, were to fall in at any moment and be lost forever? It had traveled across the galaxy to be there, and he couldn't take just 2 more steps to pick it up? Had he come all the way to Antarctica and spent weeks here just to come home empty-handed? And this time he'd get to sell it. Buzz tried dragging the stone toward him with the metal detector, but it wouldn't budge. He didn't force it, for fear that he'd accidentally knock the stone into the abyss. Kneeling down next to the crevasse, but refusing to look down, Buzz reached out with his right hand and started to take the rock with clumsy, gloved fingers. Just then, he heard a shout in his dad's voice. "What are you doing, Buzz?" His voice sounded closer than expected. Startled, Buzz let go of the rock. It was going to fall in. He pounced forward and grabbed it, tightly this time. Now he was face to face with the crevasse, staring down into the gloom. He could feel himself sliding. Buzz grabbed his ice pick with his left hand and took a wild swing at the ice. He tried digging in with his crampons, but his feet kept slipping. Something was slowing his fall. Maybe his dad, or maybe people die in slow motion. He could see a bottom now. Maybe it was only 30 feet down. Maybe he'd make it. Chapter 4. Gone. Buzz lay on a hospital bed, staring up at the fluorescent lights. He'd only been there for a few hours. He was already desperate to leave. Where to, he didn't know. He wished he could go to the moon. Buzz was hungry, but he refused to eat. He didn't deserve to eat. He'd left his father for dead in the crevasse. He tried to wake him. He tried to carry him out. He'd shouted for help for no reason. But it was all for naught. The fall had been too great. After he climbed out, Buzz saw the scars in the ice where his dad had fought tooth and nail to hold on. And all Buzz had suffered was the loss of half of his left pinky finger. What was he going to tell Mom? That he fell in because Dad startled him? He squeezed the presumed meteorite as hard as he could in his left hand. How could he have cared more about a soulless space rock than his own father's life? He had held on to it like it was his baby, even as he fell in. He could have used his right hand to try to grab onto something. A part of Buzz wanted to get rid of the meteorite, but then the trip would have been even more in vain. He knew that Dad would have appreciated the stone and its journey across eternity and infinity. Maybe a piece of his dad's soul had entered it. Buzz had carried it with him all the way to McMurdo, through mountain passes, around crevasses, and across the vast Ross ice shelf. So he could hardly throw it away now. He had stopped to sleep and eat only when he could go no further. On reaching McMurdo, he was too tired to argue with a man who suggested that he follow him to the hospital. Then he had woken up, sans pinky finger. What would he do now to honor his father's memory? He wasn't going to have a boring, normal life. That much was for sure. "Mr. Buzz Gomez?" It was one of the nurses. "Just sign your discharge and you're free to go." Buzz took the clipboard and signed the form, before pausing at the date field. He didn't know what day it was, much less the time of day. "It's the 28th. "Thanks," said Buzz, hastily scribbling May 28th, 2094, and returning the clipboard. No one knew about his father. Maybe he had to tell someone. He opened his mouth to tell the nurse, but no words came out. Buzz had parked his snowmobile in the parking lot, his dad's ride in tow. He still had to return them to the rental shop. 5 minutes later, he was at the front desk. "Rental slip?" said a gruff-looking man with a gray beard. My dad had it." "Where's your dad?" Buzz leaned on the wooden counter, arms outstretched, and looked down at his boots. He's dead." It was the first time he'd said it out loud, other than to himself. "Sorry, kid." "Crevasse?" Buzz nodded. He started choking up. It was the first real human empathy he'd experienced in days. "Should we send out a recovery team?" Buzz shook his head. "I got the bike," he whispered. Buzz sat across the table from a gray-haired, fair-skinned, bespectacled man with a round middle and a large nose. They were in an office that had grown small with years of cluttering. "Quite old-fashioned of you to have so many dusty old books." "No one has ever gone to the trouble of digitizing a lot of old books. And as a guidance counselor, I like to quickly pull the books off the shelf to show people." "So, Buzz, feeling tired of hitting the books?" "I guess I can understand, given the circumstances." "I don't see the use. I think I will just go back to meteorite hunting after the summer term," said Buzz. "Will you defer your admission to the University of Nevada?" Buzz shrugged. "It's not what I would call a stable, long-term career, Buzz. What about your intellectual talent?" "My father was the most intellectual person I've ever known," said Buzz. "I'm sorry, Buzz, but it sounds like he worked hard to give you opportunities he never had." "He chose that life. I'd choose it too." "You have a talent with words, Buzz. I've read your work in the school paper." "Yeah, maybe I'll write some fiction while I'm in the field," said Buzz dispassionately. "It's sure safer in an office. Forgive me for saying it. You almost seem to have a death wish." "Yeah, I'd rather die than have a boring, normal life," said Buzz bitterly. "Don't you ever get bored in the field?" "Yeah, but I get to listen to audiobooks. And I get to be outside." "Outside in rain, snow, sleet, and blazing sunshine?" said the guidance counselor with a twinkle in his eye. "I wish you all the best, Buzz. I really do." "Thank you, sir," said Buzz, taking his counselor's extended hand. "I beg you to please stay safe." "I will try," said Buzz seriously. "It's none of my business, but have you told your mother yet?" "No, sir," said Buzz with a grimace. "I've caused her enough pain lately." "Maybe she'll feel better if you get your admission deferred for a year. And don't go back to Antarctica for a while." "I think you're right, sir." Chapter 5. Titus. Buzz tightened his red bandana, pulling on the 2 half-hitches knot that fastened it to the back of his neck. The wind had picked up, and the desert sand was blowing around. He'd have to head back and call it a day if it got much worse. But he wasn't looking forward to 12 hours of loneliness in the tent. Buzz felt his pocket vibrate. It was his phone. He hadn't had a phone call in a week. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Buzz hollered over the wind. "Hi, am I speaking to Buzz Gomez?" asked a friendly female voice. "Speaking. This is Sally from the office of Zozo founder Titus O'Rourke. Do you have a moment to talk?" Buzz stared out at the sparsely forested desert in bewilderment. Do you have the wrong number?" "It is Buzz Gomez, the meteorite hunter, isn't it?" Buzz's mouth fell open. Did Titus O'Rourke really know who he was? "It is." "I'm hearing a lot of wind on your end. Are you outside right now?" asked the woman. "Yeah, I'm actually out meteorite hunting." "Okay, I'll keep it short. First of all, we'd like to extend our heartfelt condolences about your father, Buzz. Mr. O'Rourke is a meteorite enthusiast and saw a note in Space Magazine about your father. He would like to speak with you." "I would be honored," said Buzz. "But why?" "I think I'll just let him explain. Could he call you at the top of the hour? Will that give you time to get out of the wind?" "That works," said Buzz. "Great, Buzz. Talk to you soon." Bye." What in the world? Was his dad really that well known? Buzz had seen Titus O'Rourke's famous shaved head in the news as a kid. He didn't know he'd left Zozo. He had never heard O'Rourke speak, and certainly didn't know that he was a meteorite enthusiast. Was he just hoping for a cut-rate deal? It seemed unlikely that a billionaire would go to that trouble. But Buzz couldn't think what the hell else O'Rourke would be calling about. Buzz ran towards the setting sun and soon found his own faint footprints from that morning. Minutes earlier, he had felt tired and lonely. He couldn't help replaying his father's death over and over again in his mind. He had remembered staring into his father's lifeless brown eyes, and the sudden, desolate solitude that invaded his soul as he gulped the frigid Antarctic air. But now his whole being felt electrified with anticipation. Maybe, just maybe, something good had come out of his father's passing. Maybe the long nightmare was ending. Buzz slowed down to follow in his tracks. It would be better not to break into a sweat, since daily showering was not an option in the desert. He could see his yellow tent amidst the trees ahead. It was the same tent that he had used with his father in Antarctica. Buzz unzipped the door of his tent and felt his spirits rise as he climbed into the bright, golden interior. It was 10 minutes to 5. Would O'Rourke offer him a job? Did he have a daughter Buzz could meet? 5 minutes. Did O'Rourke want to go meteorite hunting? Or did he have an extra special meteorite that he wanted to show off? 2 minutes. 1 minute. Time. Buzz held up his phone and just stared at the blank black screen. Maybe O'Rourke had realized that talking to an unaccomplished 17-year-old kid wasn't a top priority after all. Maybe he was busy making a multi-million-dollar deal? The phone lit up. It was an unknown number again. Buzz stared at his phone's lunar Earthrise wallpaper for a few seconds. Answering instantly may seem desperate. Then again, the caller had very high time costs. "Hello?" said Buzz, trying to sound confident. He figured he'd better make a strong impression. "Hi, Buzz, this is Sally again. Can I transfer you now?" "Sure." Buzz heard a beep. The line rang twice. "Hey, this is Titus. Is this Buzz?" He sounded just like a regular guy. "Yes, Mr. O'Rourke. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to call me. I know your time is very valuable." I don't like to think of my time as so much more valuable than everyone else's. That stresses me out. Well, I bet it's more valuable than mine. I'm just wandering around the desert. Oh, are you meteorite hunting? I've actually always wanted to try it. Which desert? The Kalahari, sir. Where's that? Botswana. And where's that? Southern Africa. Amazing. I've never been to Africa. I'd love to go. Yeah, you should, said Buzz. I should work less, said Titus. Hey, I'd hologram you, but I'm guessing you don't have Wi-Fi? No, I'm actually in a tent right now, drinking recycled urine. There's a lot to be said for that kind of life. Well, it's not that great, said Buzz. Are you alone out there? Sorry about your dad, Buzz. I actually bought meteorites from him a couple times. Seemed like an honest guy. Oh, you knew my dad? That's amazing. Yeah, I'm by myself here. Gutsy to be carrying on your dad's work like that. I'm sure he'd be proud. I don't think he'd be thrilled with me for not going to college, though. Well, that makes two of us. I guess there's hope for me yet, Buzz replied. Yeah, you have plenty of options. I might even have one for you, but only if you really want it. Buzz held his tongue. I read about how you made it out of the Antarctic interior all by yourself. Sounds like you've already been through a lot in life. Thank you, sir. So, what kind of an opportunity? Honestly, it'll sound crazy saying it over the phone. Maybe because it is crazy. I'd rather show you. And if you're not interested, that's totally fine too. I just ask that you keep it a secret. Sir, you have my word of honor, said Buzz. Thanks. So, how long are you in Botswana? I could fly you to New York, and even fly you back to Botswana if you decide that's where you really want to be. That'd be amazing, sir. It's getting a little lonely out here. Chapter 6 Bullet Express. It looks like a bullet, said Titus. It had the proportions and the shiny, golden color of a bullet, but its dimensions were about 1,000 times bigger. How does it run? Laser-induced annihilation of ultra-dense hydrogen. Creates matter-antimatter explosions. Holy moly. Is there a way to go inside? Sure, just climb up, said Titus, pointing to a golden ladder running up the side of the ship. Now? Go ahead. Buzz walked up to the ladder and climbed. The ladder ran out before long. Where was the door? Give it a hard push to your right. Buzz reached out and pushed on the cold, golden metal. Even harder! Buzz kicked it with his right foot. A heavy, 1-foot-thick door slowly swung open. It's all dark inside, Buzz called out. Just climb in, said Titus calmly. Buzz swallowed. Was this a trap? Had Titus brought him there to be a guinea pig in some crazy science experiment? A half-dozen floor lamps came on just as Buzz put his foot through the doorway. He stood at the edge of what looked like a large, circular living room. There were 5 couches and 4 TV screens. There was a foosball table, a card table, a shelf of virtual reality headsets, and a treadmill. The room had an off-white carpet and white walls that looked to be made of plastic. Buzz could see no visible indication whatsoever that he was in a spaceship. The only strange thing was the lack of windows. What do you think, Buzz? Definitely not what I was expecting, Buzz shouted. Make yourself at home, said Titus. Buzz could hear him starting up the ladder. Buzz sat on a light gray couch. Moments later, Titus climbed through the doorway, slightly out of breath. So, ever wanted to go to space, Buzz? Buzz looked Titus in the eye. Sure, who doesn't? Seriously, wouldn't you like to go? Are we talking hypothetically here? Said Buzz slowly. Not necessarily. Titus reached inside his suit jacket and pulled out a dark photo. He handed it to Buzz. It's 1 trillion miles away. What is it? Said Buzz, bewildered. I just see green lights. Ever seen green stars before, Buzz? Asked Titus. Can't say I have. Titus reached into his jacket again and passed another dark photo to Buzz. See the shadows? There's some kind of a geological formation. You said it's 1 trillion miles away. How far is that in light years? Less than 1/5 of a light year, said Titus. Isn't that actually kind of close? So, what is it? We're pretty sure it's got to be a planet. We estimate that its mass is almost as great as Earth's. And the green lights? That's what we aim to go find out. In case there's advanced life, we're sending care packages on ahead of us. Care packages? Yeah, they're little yellow boxes, said Titus, holding his hands about a foot apart. They include Milky Way candy bars and photos of life on Earth, and a picture book about our mission to their planet. The book also talks a bit. How are you sending them? Asked Buzz. They're already on their way. 3 little rockets, each with 100 packages. Wow, said Buzz. And I'm bringing along a few more picture books. Nice. Going non-digital. The aliens might not have the same power outlets as we do. Titus chuckled. This is what I need on a long mission. A sense of humor. I don't need an astronaut. I want good people who are willing to let go of their earthly attachments. And you're young and reckless and don't have a family. Buzz looked uncertain. Titus sat down on a couch. Or you could stay on Earth, just like 12 billion other people, doing all the things people do, like working, playing, imbibing, fornicating, sleeping, arguing. Nothing particularly memorable, really. Buzz looked around the room. There are no windows. The ship is equipped with periscope and telescope. And how long would I be stuck in here? How many other people are coming? Titus nodded understandingly. There would be 3 others, including myself. And it'd take less than 2 years, which really isn't so bad. You're going? Wouldn't miss it for the world, Buzz. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Buzz stood up and started pacing. He had to think it over. How are we even going to stay in our seats if there's no gravity? And what about food and water? The G-force acceleration of the ship will simulate a weak gravitational force, and all of our wastewater will be recycled, which you already know something about. Also, we have a 4-year supply of everything drink powder. Comes in plain, vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. Buzz raised his eyebrows. Are you planning a return journey? I am. Okay, so no real food? A stockpile of 10,000 pieces of salted, high-fiber pita bread. That's it, I'm afraid. We can't be cooking Thanksgiving dinners in space. But really, we'll have better fare than the seamen of 500 years ago. Talk about unsanitary. Yeah, it could be worse for sure. But, sir, I still don't understand. Why me? Titus sighed. I don't have any kids, Buzz. And you sounded like an incredible young man going through a tough time. I thought it would mean a lot to you. It does, said Buzz quickly. So, does your ship have a name? He asked, craning his neck to look around the room again. I'm open to suggestions. How about the Bullet Express? Sounds like a train. But I like it. It has a sense of humor. Chapter 7. The Phone Call. I didn't realize that Titus O'Rourke knew your father. The woman was tall, light-skinned, and had a stern countenance. She stood at a stove, stirring a pot. I think he was just a customer, Mom. I suppose he had a lot of wealthy clients. In any case, that was sweet of him to ring you up. What'd you two talk about? Meteorite hunting. A bit about space, too. So he's a big space enthusiast, huh? Yeah, he definitely is. You know he stepped down as CEO of Zozo to become director of the National Observation Agency? No, I don't know much about him, said Mrs. Gomez. I only ordered from Zozo a couple of times, but good for him that he put his passions over making more money. Yeah, I'm sure he has enough money. So, Mom, I didn't tell you, but he actually invited me to meet him in New York. And I did, on my way back over here. He even paid for my flight. Mrs. Gomez looked Buzz in the eye. Oh, so that's why you came back so soon. Did he try to buy a meteorite from you? No, he didn't. But he showed me something he's building. Mrs. Gomez put down her wooden spoon. What? What's he building? Buzz shifted his weight uneasily. Was he really going to spill the beans? Would his mom even believe him? Actually, Mom, I'd rather not risk violating his confidence. I'd rather he tell you himself. Oh, well, that's thoughtful of you. Of course I'd like to talk to him. Buzz took out his phone. Maybe he'll pick up now. It rang a few times, and Titus answered. Hey, buddy, how are you feeling about things? Hi, Mr. O'Rourke. I was actually wondering if you would mind chatting with my mom. Not at all. Put her on. Buzz handed the phone to his mom. Hi, Mr. O'Rourke. I hear you showed my son something. Seems to be a bit of a secret. And what did my Buzz do to earn the unexpected pleasure? Mrs. Gomez smiled. Buzz and I really appreciate that. It's been a tough few months for us. Buzz's mom walked to the window and looked out on their dark, quiet residential street. The moon shined brightly. An opportunity? You mean like a job for Buzz? That'd be great if you could give him something to do in his gap year. The suspense was killing Buzz. He left the kitchen and sat down in the living room, his heart pounding. Gap years? Plural? Buzz could hear his mom laugh in the other room. You ought to hire him as an astronaut. Come, Mr. O'Rourke, you must be pulling my leg. He's a 17-year-old who doesn't even have his driver's license. Yes, he's been through a lot. Yes, I'm not saying he couldn't handle it. Silence. Where do you intend to take him? Silence. Okay, so you won't tell me. Yet you want me to give up my son for 4 years, maybe forever, right after losing my husband. Silence. Fortunately, he's still underage for 6 months. And my answer is no. I'm sure you're doing important work, Mr. O'Rourke, but you'll just have to find someone else for your science experiment. I don't know why you want him anyway. Silence. It was a pleasure talking to you too. Mrs. Gomez walked into the living room, shaking her head. She handed the phone back to Buzz. I won't have it. I'm not losing you too. I've let you take risks, but this is going too far. Buzz just looked down at the floor. He didn't want to argue with her. He didn't want to bring her any more pain and loss. I understand, Mom. I'm gonna go for a walk. Okay, but you're not going. Buzz stood up and went straight out the front door. He walked down the dimly lit street. When home was out of sight, Buzz unpocketed his phone. He called Titus. Buzz heard a weary voice on the other end. Hey, Buzz. Put you in a tight spot here, having to go against your mother's wishes and all. It's okay, sir. Not too surprising, really. I feel bad for her. But it really is your life, said Titus sympathetically. I don't know if that makes it any easier. It's a decision anyone of any age would wrestle with. I know my dad would have wanted me to go. He would have thought it's the coolest thing ever. Attaboy. Since you're a minor, I don't think I can legally take you with me. But we'll just go anyway. I'm sure your mom will feel differently when you come back a hero 4 years from now. I hope you're right. So, when do we leave? Chapter 8. Destiny. Dawn was breaking, but Buzz couldn't see it. He was already inside the Bullet Express, strapped down on one of the couches and staring up at the white plastic ceiling. Buzz knew they were floating on the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere near New York City. He could feel the ship rocking slightly. Maybe Buzz's sleep deprivation would help to calm his nerves. He hadn't slept at all that night, and only a little the night before. It was hard to feel scared out of his wits when a part of him also felt like sleeping. It was all in God's hands now. He wouldn't be on this ship if it wasn't meant to be. Buzz hadn't said goodbye to anyone. At dinner the previous evening, he told his mom that he was going to spend the night taking an entire timed practice SAT test. He knew his mom, an early riser, wasn't likely to knock on his door that night. He climbed out of his bedroom window as the September twilight deepened. Then he crept quietly along the roof and down a tree. Then he ran. A half-mile from home, he took a taxi to the Vegas airport. From there, he flew supersonic to New York City. A man in a suit drove Buzz to a heliport, and he got his first helicopter ride. Titus was already on the chopper, along with crew members Peter and Tom. He gathered from Titus that Peter was the one who discovered the planet, and that Tom worked at the same observatory. They flew into the darkness, away from the bright lights of the city. In the moonlight, Buzz could just make out the ripples of the ocean below. After about half an hour, Buzz saw a faint reflection of gold. Something was sticking up from the ocean. There were faint lights, illuminating a rectangular platform. When they landed, no one was there to meet them. And now Buzz had been lying on his back for half an hour, waiting for launch. He felt bad about leaving his mom behind, without so much as a goodbye. He'd miss a few people from high school, but not many. While they were studying in college, he'd be soaring across the heavens, going where no man had ever gone, and he wouldn't have any homework to do. Would anyone see the launch? Would people figure out that he had been on board? With the one and only Titus O'Rourke? Rumors were bound to swirl about his disappearance. His friend Steve was sure to come asking, and Mom would have to tell him what happened. Steve would lose his marbles. Maybe Mom would feel proud when she saw how excited people were about it. And now it was starting. The ship was vibrating. Buzz couldn't hear much through his noise-canceling headphones, but he could sure feel it. Then he felt the couch push up on his back. Did that mean they were airborne? Buzz felt heavy. Even if he took off the straps, he didn't know if he could get up. So this was it. This was the sensation of leaving Earth. Nothing was going to stop their upward trajectory now. Buzz wished there was a window, but he also didn't. He didn't know if he could deal with all of the sensory stimuli at once. He felt like grabbing onto something, so he squeezed the straps on his chest. There was turbulence, but not much more than he'd had on his descent into New York. He knew takeoff was safe these days. Until you reach low Earth orbit, that is. Orbital debris was the cause for concern. There were used rocket boosters, defunct satellites, a few obliterated test dummies from anti-spacecraft weapons tests, and even plain garbage. Buzz knew that a couple of ships had exploded before they could escape Earth's gravity. But there Buzz lay, still alive. He didn't know how high they were now. Or rather, how far they were from Earth. Buzz closed his eyes. He'd never felt so helpless in his life, but it was a liberating helplessness. There was nothing to do but lie there and await his destiny. He imagined the great blue planet beneath, and infinity all around him. Buzz felt like the smallest speck of dust. Hopefully, he thought, the thick walls of the Bullet Express would protect him. But really, what were his chances of making it the whole 1,000,000,000,000 miles? No one had ever done it before. They've never tried, thought Buzz. It was true. No one had ever tried to go 1,000,000,000,000 miles before. They needed a destination, said Buzz aloud. I have one. Buzz lay there for another minute, his eyes closed. He heard a voice. Was someone calling his name? Buzz opened his eyes. Titus was standing over him, smiling.